Welcome to Metrics That Matter. We will learn how to make sense of your fundraising data to make better decisions and raise more money with less effort. Brought to you by fundraisingreportcard.com, a simple and free analytics and reporting tool for nonprofit pros. Now measuring is easier than ever with fundraisingreportcard.com. Welcome to Metrics That Matter. I'm Tim Chen, host of the show. Coming up in this episode, Zach and I talk about how to make better fundraising decisions based on measuring ROI and donor lifetime value. You can follow along at home by downloading the Metrics That Matter ebook at www.fundraisingreportcard.com/book. We'll be diving into Chapter 4 of the book right now. How's it going?
I'm good. I'm well. How are you doing, Tim?
No complaints. It's I don't know what day of the week it is, but it's a good day.
Yeah, it's kind of gloomy out, but I don't think it's supposed to snow again.
Not until this weekend.
Yeah, which is kind of wild because it's April when we're recording this, and it snowed the other day near us, so not digging that.
Yeah, me either.
But you know what I do dig, Tim?
Yeah, I'm sure you're going to tell me.
It starts with an M, and it rhymes with hectic.
Metric.
No, that was close. That was bad. Can you edit this out? No, I guess keep it in there. Never mind.
We don't edit anything. That's actually wrong. No.
Yeah, we're very authentic here at Market Smart.
So today is Chapter 4 of the book, Episode 4, Measuring Fundraising ROI with Donor Lifetime Value.
Yep.
So we're going to bring in the lifetime value that we talked about, I think it was last episode.
I feel like every episode we've kind of alluded to lifetime value and how important it is. It was one of those key metrics in episode 1, and then when we started talking about donor acquisition costs, we couldn't help but touch on the fact that it pairs really nicely with donor lifetime value.
I'm really excited, Zach, because today is the day we finally get a deep dive into Starbucks and all of that.
That Starbucks stuff is wild, isn't it?
It is, yeah.
I've done presentations before, like Foundation Center and stuff like that, and that's one of my slides that I go to, and everyone's just like, BS, like it can't be true. And then you link to the research, and it's like, okay,
it seems
I guess,
valid, yeah.
Yeah,
I know
amazing.
how much some of the people I know that go to Starbucks spend every week, and yeah, that makes sense as a lifetime value. Yeah.
And one of the things you just hit on right there is what we're going to be talking about today, is they go every week. So one of the input metrics for calculating lifetime value, whether it be customer lifetime value, donor lifetime value, is frequency of, in our case, giving.
Yeah.
So if you imagine that some of your peers who are going to Starbucks once a week or multiple times, every day, if they were donating small amounts every day, how much that would add up to. And that's this idea here with lifetime value.
Yeah. Let's I guess, dive into it. Yeah. Okay. So what is lifetime value not?
So when we're calculating lifetime value, we're creating a sort of projection, but we're not prescribing an exact amount, a dollar amount that a donor is going to contribute into the future. The world that I live in and the world that we live in with Fundraising Report Card is all descriptive analytics. We're analyzing historical data, and we're not necessarily prescribing or predicting future events or things like that. But when we do talk about lifetime value, we are coming up with a projection. So we can look at all this historical data and we can calculate some input metrics. And from those input metrics, we can project what a relationship with a donor might be valued at. So we're not creating some sort of prescription that says execute X, Y, and Z here and it'll be worth exactly this. We can't. We simply can't. We don't have models like that. We're simply looking at some historical data over a 12-month period of time, and then over the lifetime of your donor file, and then we're projecting what a relationship could be worth.
And generally this is done for a range of donors versus an individual.
You can't calculate donor lifetime value for an individual. You can sum up their lifetime giving, but that's not going to be indicative necessarily of future behaviors amongst, a wider segment of donors. So you could look at, John and Jane Doe, a couple that's been contributing to your organization for the past 10 years, and their individual, their file lifetime giving could be $10,000. That's not a metric that you can take and say that, John and Mary, another couple in your database, they're going to be worth $10,000 to your organization as well. On a one-to-one level, you you can sum up lifetime giving, but you can't come up with a lifetime value. Where you can, though, is by breaking down lifetime value by segment. So really what you can do is you can calculate donor lifetime value across your whole database. So you could say, amongst every single constituent in our donor database, what is the value, what is the projected value of our relationship with them? So if we were to acquire one new donor today, what would be the projected value of that relationship over the lifetime of that new donor's giving? So you could look at your entire database, and we're going to dive into the input metrics in a moment, but you calculate these 3 input metrics, you multiply them together, and you get your lifetime value, and it might be $100. But where this becomes more powerful is when you segment particular areas of your database. One segment could be acquisition channel. So if you had acquired a large constituency of new donors from a gala or an event that you held this year or in prior years, we need historical information here, you could then say, well, what is the lifetime value of donors that were acquired through this particular channel? Or a segmentation of giving level. What's the lifetime value of our relationship with donors in the under $100 segment versus the lifetime value of a donor making major contributions, $5,000 and above, for example. The process is the same, calculating input metrics, multiplying them together, and coming up with this projection, but it becomes more valuable and more real and actionable when you break it down by particular segments.
It's also with acquisition channel, because then you could put more marketing budget into certain channels that are doing better for you.
And if you think back to our conversation in the last episode about donor acquisition costs, although it's challenging to calculate, then you can start to pair that acquisition cost with the lifetime value of a donor coming through a particular channel, and now you know if you're profitable or not.
Yeah. How's segmentation changed based on the size of the organization, if at all?
Oh, I mean, depending on the amount of time and resources that you can allocate towards calculating these metrics, that'll inform whether you can get super granular, which would be, every single acquisition channel, versus maybe you look at no acquisition channels, but you just focus on dollar amount segmentation.
Right. So the more resources you have, the more segments you're able to make based because you have more time and all that yeah.
And we both know, regardless of if you're at a large organization or a small organization, if you're a development professional, you probably don't have more time. So that's why, like within Fundraising Report Card, for example, we break it down by giving level segmentation. So that gives you at least kind of in the snap of a finger some lifetime value metrics. And then, of course, you can upload specific campaign data and get those lifetime value metrics as well. But it's tricky. It's challenging. My personal experience working with organizations is any lifetime value metric is a good place to start because most aren't calculating that. They might be looking at lifetime giving of individual constituents and kind of saying, okay, that one was like 1,000, this one's 500. Donors must give like $750 when they join the organization. But most aren't looking at even overall donor lifetime value that I've had a chance to partner with. And that's just a good place to start. Overall LTV and then some of the dollar segmented LTV values will help inform how much you can start to spend to acquire donors in those particular segments.
Okay. Talk about viability in the book, business viability. And is there anything to mention on the fundraising department, their viability and what that means for them?
Yeah, so it's an interesting concept. The idea that the engine that's operating is sustainable. You'll go to conferences or you'll hear speakers that talk about building like a sustainable fundraising program. And when we talk about lifetime value, whether it be client, customer, or donor lifetime value, it starts to give us insight into the viability of what we've built, what we have. Tim, if we looked at our business here and it cost us $10,000 to acquire each new customer, which if we think back to the Starbucks example, it very well may. I don't know our customer acquisition cost numbers off the top of my head.
Sure.
But then if our lifetime value of that client was only $5,000, it's not like we're going to be in business all that long.
No.
You're going to be cash flow negative. You're not going to make money, blah, blah, blah. And although when we're talking about donors and we're talking about nonprofit organizations, we still want to make a profit. It goes back to the organization and to be reinvested, maybe even raises for staff, things like that.
Exactly.
This concept of business model viability applies to a development department or a fundraising program in the sense that when we are engaging, acquiring, and then stewarding donors, that has to be, or at least should be, a profitable experience for the organization. And if we're spending too much donor acquisition cost and not receiving the proper lifetime value, low LTV, you're not going to be in business all that long, or you need to find other channels to acquire donors or other methods to increase their lifetime value. I know in the book there's a few different graphics that kind of highlight this,
Right.
but really, if donor acquisition cost is greater than donor lifetime value, it's not going to last that long. If donor acquisition cost is less than donor lifetime value, it's sustainable, and it's something that can be like a primary function of the organization. It can further, what the organization strives to do.
Yeah, and you may even discover a way to get additional staff through this study.
Well, just from measuring these metrics, you can start to justify hiring opportunities, when we need new staff, where we should allocate those resources in terms of people and money and things like that. These metrics, we experience it here at our for-profit company. When you have data to back things up, it furthers the conversation a lot more quickly with leadership because it's no one's opinion. It's just the numbers. And you look at the numbers and it says, this is what you should do. So you do it. Helps that friction that can come up, from time to time when it's gut feeling versus gut feeling. It can really drive things home. And looking at LTV, comparing it to donor acquisition cost, and knowing which channels or which segments of donors are most profitable for the organization. It sounds kind of utopian, but this is literally why, as a vendor, we're in business, is to try and help this happen. It's still challenging, like we've been talking about throughout all these episodes, but that's the loop that we want, is how much did it cost to acquire that donor? And then what do we expect that lifetime value to be? Okay, are we sustainable? Check that box. Let's keep driving resources in that direction.
Yeah. Before we dive into the Starbucks example, very excited about that. What are some good goal ratios for nonprofits to be striving for to hit for acquisition costs to lifetime value?
I don't have any numbers off the top of my head. That's a really good question, though. And I would advocate, and maybe we can do some research and put some things in the show notes. There's a lot of research on cost per dollar raised and different acquisition channels there. So there's existing research. That takes a little bit of a step away from really comparing donor acquisition cost to lifetime value, because those cost per dollar raised analyses just take into consideration the initial donation amount that you receive. But there's still a good place to start. And I know that they're broken down. I think AFP International has there's some webpage that I've been on in the past that breaks down, like, this is the average cost per dollar raised for direct mail. This is the cost per dollar raised for this channel and that channel and another channel. And those are good benchmark metrics to measure against. Unfortunately, with the data that we collect through Fundraising Report Card and most of the relationships that I have directly with organizations, I'm not getting all that detailed information about donor acquisition costs. So it's hard to kind of say, a good benchmark would be acquire a donor for $20 and they have a $100 lifetime value. Mm-hmm. I will say a rule of thumb, though, whatever that lifetime value is, don't exceed it, obviously, in that acquisition phase. Because if lifetime value is $100 for an under $100 donor, let's say, their first donation may only be $20 or $25. It depends on some of the input metrics to calculate that LTV. So you need to look at this as the long-term game. So it's not only acquisition cost, but it's the full cost of maintaining that relationship with the donor. Because one of the input metrics for lifetime value is lifespan. How long is that donor maintaining a relationship with the organization? If lifetime value is $100, you know that your donor acquisition costs and then other ongoing costs to maintain that relationship obviously shouldn't be greater than $100. Maybe, you strive for 50 or 75 or something along those lines. So anyway, AFP has some good resources for cost per dollar raised, and unfortunately, I don't have great numbers to share with kind of ratios.
Sure,
but obviously, don't go above 1-to-1.
I just want to take a minute to remind you to download the Metrics That Matter book by visiting www.fundraisingreportcard.com/book. This book will help you learn what data-driven fundraising is and identify key metrics to measure. You'll learn how to calculate your retention rates and identify ways you can benchmark performance against your peers, and much more. Once again, go to fundraisingreportcard.com/book to download your copy.
Starbucks, they make a lot of money. Big company.
Yes.
I've got the little study, I guess, on their lifetime value of customers here. I thought we'd just kind of go through a little bit about what Starbucks data is and maybe relate that back to nonprofits.
If you have the graphic pulled up in front of you, maybe read through it, Tim. I know that the lifetime value is just ridiculously high, 5 figures high. And there's multiple different calculations that this research provided to come up with those numbers. Yeah, read through it if you don't mind.
Yeah. So the variables you're dealing with for lifetime value, It's 5.9 on average USD for
Average transaction.
Yeah. So that'd be nonprofit world, an average donation.
Yep.
And then this is averaging between 5 customers, average 5 customers. 4.2 visits a week is the average.
So now we're starting to get into our frequency.
And then across those 5 visits, they're looking at $24.30 a week as average.
So we're taking the average transaction cost and the frequency of, average donation and frequency of giving, we're multiplying them together. So this is, again, what we do when we're calculating LTV. And then I imagine they have some concept of lifespan in there.
Yes, they do. 20-year lifespan is the average customer that they have.
Which is ridiculous. But people drink coffee. I guess coffee doesn't go out of style.
They do. It's a habit, yeah, and it's available a lot of places.
So then when you start to consider that people are spending on average, it was around $25 a week for 20 years, you can start to see how we end up with a ginormous figure, which I was looking at my bank account the other day. I can't imagine spending 10 grand right now on coffee. That would.
But little over little, it adds up.
It really does add up. And that speaks to, the Starbucks example genuinely speaks to kind of the stickiness of your relationship with a constituent. There's a huge push in our sector for monthly giving programs, and with great reason. Because look at this. A Starbucks constituent spends $5, $6 per transaction, but they're there multiple times per week.
Yeah.
Obviously with our donors, with our constituents, it's a little bit more challenging. It's very transactional to buy a cup of coffee. It's very, very, very not transactional to make a donation. It's very intimate and emotional. But we can take a step towards making it slightly more transactional, which may or may not be a good thing. We could have a whole conversation one day about the Amazon donation program and how that's actually a negative. How that's actually a bad thing because it does make
connecting you with the actual nonprofit.
It's way too transactional.
Yeah.
But these monthly giving programs, they take the frequency of donation up to 12 times a year.
Yeah, I don't know if this is relevant at all. Patreon's starting to be a pretty big thing. Content creators that are making very niche content for a very specific audience. They're getting paid monthly, like $1, $2 a month, maybe $5, and they have a relationship because they're sharing something that they're making for them on a monthly basis. And
the kind of scary thing is, and it's scary because it takes a lot of resources from an organization perspective to maintain and grow this, but $1 a month, $5 a month, $10 a month. We're not talking major contributions when we're talking those. Those are super tiny, right?
Yeah,
it's not as sexy as a 5-figure contribution or a 6-figure contribution. But if you have 100 people at those levels who are retaining year over year and who are giving 12 times per year, their lifetime value could be really, really high, hundreds of dollars, thousands of dollars. And that's where the Starbucks example, that's what it solidifies is that if people are giving frequently and for many years, and they're not lapsing, your LTV is going to be high. You can actually spend a considerable amount of money to advertise, to market, and to bring those people and then maintain relationships with those people who might give $10 a month. Yeah. That's what's so compelling here about looking at your own data and getting a baseline for what your lifetime value is. What has your donation frequency been year over year? You could ask that question to a board member, to a development professional, and they wouldn't know. And it's not their fault. It's simply that the tools that you have at your disposal don't share that information with you, but they're incredibly insightful when thinking about, we should allocate more resources here, or maybe we shouldn't. And that goes back to the major gift idea, is that if you do have 5-figure, 6-figure contributions coming in and you are able to retain those donors, that lifetime value up there, I've worked with organizations where lifetime value of major donors is over $1 million.
Yeah, unreal.
It's okay, so we're going to justify and spend resources, tens of thousands of dollars, lots of staff time to cultivate those relationships and make sure that they don't go anywhere.
Because it's worth it.
I mean, how could it not be? So what you need to do, at least from my perspective, kind of outside looking in and having this, as a vendor, it's really interesting. You're not on the ground with any one organization for more than a few hours. You kind of duck in and duck out, and you see the similar kind of, pain points and issues that organizations face. Pain point or issue would be calculating this is really hard. It doesn't have to be anymore. Drag and drop, upload that data to the tool that we've worked on, Fundraising Report Card. Get a baseline. What is our lifetime value? What is it across our whole donor database? What is it across specific giving amount segments? So our annual donors, our under $100 donors, our major donors. And can we use that information to inform where we should be placing our efforts? Should it be on those small dollar donors? Should it be on mid-level, or should it be on our major contributions?
Back to the Starbucks example, another kind of data point they have for some of the different formulas is profit margin, which is around 21% at Starbucks. With nonprofits, would that be in your segmentation being able to do profit margins per events, or what is that even something used there?
Candidly, at least in my work with organizations, we've never taken the step to really figure out like what was the margin on a per person basis, just because
it's hard.
Well, yes, it's hard, but also it's a win when we've calculated LTV, or it's a win when we've got an estimate for donor acquisition cost. But the idea there, Tim, is that there is a margin of profit, of
right.
money left over after our expenses that we should bring in. And for Starbucks, it's 21%. And that goes back to that ratio that you were asking me about before. It's like, well, what should the standard be for our organization? When we do run the gala, do we expect to make 10%? Do we expect to make 50%? Do we expect 100% return on investment? And those are incredibly hard questions to answer. Practically speaking, in my experience, I haven't worked with organizations that are doing that, simply because your estimates for donor acquisition costs are, not 100% accurate. They're a good first try. And then looking at lifetime value, it's over the lifetime of that giving. So it's hard to know immediately after an event if it was 10% profitable or 50% profitable. It's going to take a couple of years to see that lifetime value continue to go up, to then kind of compare the two. So it's challenging. An organization like Starbucks has figured it out, obviously, and a lot of for-profit businesses have, because they have tens of thousands of employees and they have billions of dollars in revenue, so they figure these things out. But I guess it goes a little bit above my pay grade.
The other data point they kind of go into a little bit is customer sat, customer satisfaction, how that plays into lifetime value. And what they found makes sense. Very satisfied customers are going to have a higher lifetime value than those that aren't satisfied. And is there a customer sat for nonprofits, and
Absolutely.
how do you figure that out? Yeah.
Donor retention rate.
Yeah.
Right? Donor retention rate is our measure of how well we're building relationships with our constituents, which essentially is customer satisfaction. If customers are satisfied, they're going to keep coming back each week. If our donors are satisfied, they're going to keep coming back. We generally look at this annually. Most organizations aren't looking at weekly retention. Or some that have monthly giving programs are going to look at monthly retention, but that's our measure in our sector of customer satisfaction, is year over year donor retention rate. And absolutely, if retention rate goes up, donor lifetime value goes up.
Yeah.
Because the lifespan of giving goes up.
Yeah.
So that's a great point, Tim.
Back to segmentation channels. Are there any often overlooked channels that people just don't even think of as something they should segment and look at?
The primary channels are where most focus is held: direct mail. If you're doing digital acquisition, looking at your digital channels, and then events and things like that. I'm trying to think through if there are other potential channels, but those are the three big ones that I experience with most organizations. The other could be if you do have a specific program in place for engaging and working with your major donors. But no, I mean, those three are kind of your primary, where you're looking at your digital acquisition, you're looking at your direct mail acquisition, and then you're looking at your different events and breaking those down to see, does one of the three have a greater lifetime value than the other? And if it does, then is it cost effective? Looking at an estimate for donor acquisition cost for that segment, is it cost effective to continue investing there? So those are your primary.
And then there's a couple different formulas for lifetime value.
There's a lot.
Is one better than another for nonprofits? And does it matter how big your organization is? What factors should you be looking at?
So size doesn't necessarily matter here. And I know we mentioned it maybe episode 2.
Consistency is important,
so yeah, so that's the big piece is we're looking for a measurement of variance across pretty much all of our key metrics, lifetime value included. So having a standardized calculation. So for example, the calculation we use in Fundraising Report Card is we take average donation amount, and all these are broken down by segment. So average donation amount of under $100 donors, donation frequency of under $100 donors, and then donor lifespan of under $100 donors. Take those three metrics, multiply them together, and we have our projection of lifetime value. Now, I did research and I was trying to find this page. It used to I'm sure it exists somewhere
Yeah.
out there on the great internet. It listed out SaaS companies, software as a service companies that were large or publicly traded,
Mhm.
and the different ways that they reported customer lifetime value to their investors, their shareholders. And the website listed like 60 different LTV calculations because each one made them look, better because of their specific circumstances. So it doesn't matter how you calculate LTV. What's important is quarter over quarter, 12 months over 12 months. You measure it the same way so that you can see if it's going up or if it's going down.
Yeah.
And the calculation that we provide within Fundraising Report Card, the benefit there is it's standardized. Every time you upload new data, it's going to be calculated the same exact way. But it doesn't matter. You can use that. You can create some Excel macro. Just make sure that it's being calculated same specific way each time.
Cool. And any other things listeners should keep in mind with all this that we've been talking about? Lifetime value,
So
acquisition cost?
Big thing when it comes to lifetime value and acquisition cost is they're incredibly important. And hopefully, if you're listening to this, you're thinking, wow, that sounds amazing. Getting to the point where you have LTV and you have acquisition costs broken down by channel is not easy. It really, really isn't. Especially because you're so busy, and especially because you have a laundry list of other responsibilities that are on your plate, meeting with donors, running whatever you need to do. So let this be almost as planting the seed that this is an area where you should invest. You should get clarity here. And the long-term benefit would be, accountability, transparency with leadership, with the board, but that getting to this kind of utopian end goal of constant feedback loop of, okay, here was acquisition cost, here's lifetime value, here's acquisition cost, here's lifetime value. It's going to take a while to get there, years, but we can start to take first steps by taking a peek under the hood. Let's look at what has historically been our lifetime value. Let's look at one particular appeal or event that we have been putting on. What is a rough estimate for donor acquisition cost? So really, I guess my anecdote or my words of wisdom, just from my experience partnering with so many organizations, would be one step at a time. This sounds great. It really, really does. Let's take it one step at a time. Let's get a baseline, a foundation, and then from that, we can start to build.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Metrics That Matter. If you like the show, make sure to review it on Apple Podcasts and pass it along to a colleague. Download the Metrics That Matter ebook at www.fundraisingreportcard.com/book. Thanks again for listening.